Hello, everyone. So today I'm joined by Natalie Costa, and Natalie is bursting at the seams with brilliant advice and parenting hacks when it comes to this tricky time of year of we've all been on holiday, the routines have all gone out the window, and now it is first week back to work, back to school. We're all feeling a little bit traumatized. So I thought, who better to talk to than Natalie? So Natalie, talk us through sort of what you do and how you found yourself an expert in this space.
So a lot of jobs to join, but thank you for having me. And yes, what do I do? So I'm a coach for parents and children, specifically helping parents and children around mental health and the well-being, emotional well-being of their children, but also focusing on the emotional well-being of themselves. Prior to this, I was a primary school teacher for 14 years. And what led me to this work is I really struggled with anxiety as a little girl. And I remember having a lot of worries, except I just thought that that was normal. And I remember in one of the years that I was teaching with year sixes that were about to go to secondary school, they were worried about, the exams and fitting in. And it dawned on me that one particular boy said to me, Miss, I'm not going to get the school placement because I'm boring. I think I'm boring. I've got nothing interesting to say. And it just made me think, this is a story that he could carry with him for the rest of his life if we don't look at unpicking that story. And so that led me on this journey of, why are we not teaching children about the power of their thoughts? And why are we not teaching children how to work through difficult feelings? Why are we only doing this in our 30s and 40s and 50s when we realize, oh, I don't need to be listening to that negative thought or those beliefs that I've had? And so that led me really on this journey in terms of, how can I make this accessible to children? So initially, my focus was on supporting children and obviously giving children all of these tools around don't believe all your thoughts, and giving them strategies to really reframe their thinking and to work through those big feelings. But the more I'm doing the work, the more I'm realizing, hold on, we've got big feelings too as grown-ups, and we've got a lot of unhelpful thoughts as well, and nobody taught us how to sit with and work through difficult feelings. I think now we're waking up to it in terms of the mental health awareness and so forth, but for many of us it wasn't taught or modeled to us. And so the work that I do now is very much about supporting parents to support their children, but equally it's supporting you as a parent as well, because you're learning this with your child in the same way.
One of the things that I found really interesting about your work was you talk about big emotions, and obviously when it comes to whether it's younger children or teenagers or even young adults, um, if you haven't built the mental muscle to understand how to deal with the big emotions, then you feel like there's something wrong with you because you're feeling them. And actually, it's only as you get into adulthood that you realize, no, big emotions are just part of the story. You can't be happy all the time. That's not part of the ebb and flow of life. That's not how it is. And I understand that with the work that you're doing now, and picking up from what you're saying, is helping adults. And in this instance, yes, we're talking about parents, but it's not just parents. This is something, it's universal, to understand that maybe how they were brought up, which was to suppress big emotions, that it was shameful to have big emotions. Don't, what are you doing getting angry and throwing things at the wall? Stop that, be quiet and sit down. We're carrying that with us and unwittingly passing that on to our own kids. So what would you say to anyone who's watching this and thinking, oh crikey, I think that's how I was raised, and I always thought that was the right thing to do, but I know it didn't make me feel really good. And that is how we parent. Kids don't realize that's how we parent, figuring out, oh, hang on, no, that didn't quite work. Um, what would you
I
say
know
to a parent? What would you say to a parent who, is thinking, oh gosh, maybe I've been getting it it wrong. How do I change and embrace this feeling of big feelings are okay in myself, and then allow that in my children?
A great question. And I think one of the first things that springs to mind is, first of all, have compassion for yourself. No wonder I'm struggling with this, because this was never given or taught or modeled to me. I wasn't allowed to have big feelings. I was taught I'm bad for showing anger or whatever that might be. So have that compassion of, I'm not a bad parent. I'm not messing up my child either. That's a key thing. And I'm learning too. And that takes real practice, because self-compassion is not taught either. Wasn't modeled, for many of us. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing is, okay, what can I start to do differently now? And one of the things that I encourage parents and children to do, if we're talking about big feelings, and I mean, there's a lot more there in terms of understanding how your child's brain works versus yours, and they will be irrational because they do not have a rational part of the brain until their mid-20s. But it's exploring, okay, what do these feelings feel like in my body? Because so often we're in our head, but we're not actually, our body is giving us clues and signs. So with children, we look at our body signals, and they're giving us little warnings telling me that bigger feeling is on the way. So what does anger feel like in my body? What does worry or anxiety? What does excitement feel like in my body as well? So all sorts of feelings. And I love, I mean, I'm a child inside, I guess, in my as education, like being a teacher as well, create feeling characters. And this is a great exercise to do with children, but even to personify your feelings of, oh, okay, well, that's, or that's tornado, the anger, or this is, whatever, worry wobbler, or giving it those names and getting a bit playful. I mean, and I know some teens might roll their eyes, but I have done this with teens. If we, just getting playful about it and starting to notice, okay, I'm feeling this anger. What does it feel like in my body versus I'm feeling the anxiety? But and the other thing as well that I use myself too is even then to start thinking, okay, if I had to personify this feeling, what would it look like? What does it feel like? Is it heavy? Is it light? And these are even questions you can use with your children. What color is it? What shape is it? What do you think your feeling is trying to tell you? Or what
Mm.
does it need to feel safe or calm? And doing this for yourself as well. And I sometimes like to even find the feeling in my body. Where do I feel the? I mean, for me, my anxiety literally like sits here, and it's like, okay, what's it trying to tell me? Like, just tune into it. But and I mean, I appreciate with anger, it's maybe more of an energetic, big feeling. So once that anger has passed, that's sometimes, especially like with children in the heat of the moment, then we can kind of have these conversations and explore that feeling.
Mm.
But recognizing, I think the key here is that we want to build our tolerance level to sit with these uncomfortable feelings if it's completely unfamiliar to us, if this is something new,
Mm.
because so often we've like suppressed it, or let's problem solve, or let's fix it,
Yeah.
how can we get rid of it? And actually, as you've said, we can't be happy all the time. And one of the things that parents often say to me is like, I want my child to be happy. Of course we want them to be happy, but that's actually so unrealistic, because life's not happy and we're not taught how to do other feelings. And
Mm.
so, but in this whole process, I think also, the compassion piece is important, but also recognize this will feel weird. It will feel strange. And maybe you can only sit with that uncomfortable feeling for a few minutes and then, okay, that's fine. But
Mm.
it's first of all becoming aware of what's going on in our body and talking to that feeling, and I mean, like, I still use this today. I talk to that anxiety that I have, and I'm like, oh, right, that's what's going on.
Mm.
But see this muscle that you're building, and be gentle with yourself if you're not familiar with this, because it takes time.
So I know you also work with parents in terms of how to navigate normal day-to-day life, because again, all of the things that you said make total sense, and it is what we would all do well to try and incorporate into our life. I try and incorporate into my life. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. But what about what sort of tools do you offer in terms of navigating the choppy waters that is a busy household? So when there's niggles, there's squabbles, there's there's kids are fighting, there's housework to be done, there's dinner to be made, you've got your own work worries, there's all this kind of, I mean, when you said tornado, that's what I was kind of imagining. It's all the stuff that goes on with daily life. What sort of tools would you suggest?
So a few things come to mind. I think recognizing, the season that you're in. So I know, back to school can sometimes be, especially if we think actually of transitions. Transitions is a key wobbly phase for many families because children just don't do transitions well because that's a part of their brain, those executive functioning skills, that's not yet fully developed. So they will have challenges transitioning. And I think for us as well to manage our own expectations, because often I find, but they know they need to get up. They know they need to brush their teeth. They know they need to pack their bags. We do this every day. Why are they not doing it? And that's frustrating. But actually, when we take a step back and we actually understand the brain, first of all, so in managing those expectations, that transitioning, organizational skills, frustration, tolerance are all those executive functioning skills that our children simply don't have because that part of their brain is not developed yet, fully developed yet. So we have to understand it's not my child should be able to be organized. My child still needs to develop the skill of being organized or the skill of learning how to tolerate those big feelings when things don't go their way. So managing our expectations first, because I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves in terms of, right, I'm going to do this, and then when it doesn't happen, now I'm the failure. And if my child acts out or there's back chat, that must mean I'm doing something wrong and it's my fault. I'm a bad parent. We can go to those things quite quickly, or I'm not managing this well. That's the other reframe of your child's behavior is not a reflection of you. But then as well, what can we do to make these transitions a little bit easier? So if back to school, I know is a big thing. And in terms of that morning transition, getting kids out of the house, bring children in. So as a family, we're discussing, look, these are some of the challenges, right? Or mommy gets mad, or I shouted at you yesterday and then you got angry and we all stormed off and we went to school and we're really mad. Doesn't feel good. How can we solve this challenge together? So it becomes us versus the challenge instead of you versus me. And I find that whenever, and we can do this in all sorts of situations, but whenever we can try and bring children in a little bit more, because kids get told what to do left, right, and center all the time. Do this, go here, eat this, do that, da 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 da. When we can just bring them in a bit more within boundaries, of course, not like, right, I want pancakes for breakfast every day, as one of my clients once said to me, like, well, that might not happen in your morning routine. But it fills their agency bucket, right? They've got that internal locus of control of actually my thoughts matter as well. And this works just as well with sibling fights as well. If there's fighting going on, have the conversation. And what I'd also say is in all of these tricky conversations, a key thing that we want to try and do, and this goes for all relationships, and it feels really counterintuitive, but it's a skill that we can learn, is really learning to connect to their experience and their emotion first. So mirroring and echoing, do you know what? I know it's so frustrating when I'm asking you to pack up and you just want to be on your iPhone a bit longer and now it's time for bed and I know, and I'm being super annoying. You're mirroring whatever that feeling is first. Because when we do that, we're meeting them in that emotion that they're having. And from there, because what actually happens when we mirror, the oxytocin is released in the brain. And oxytocin is the bonding chemical. And that also calms and cools the brain. Because when we're stressed, that cortisol is obviously elevated. But it's the same as if I say, Andrea, if you're really upset about something and you're like, this happened and that happened. And then I say, Andrea, just calm down. Just calm down. Or it's not a big deal. It never works, right? It's like, oh. Whereas if I'm like, you know what, that's really tough, or that's really, if I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but that's really, like that's not that's really shit, right? If I just sit with you in it first, it doesn't take the problem away, but it brings it down. And then from there, it's easier to then problem solve. But this feels really counterintuitive. I get it. Because the last thing you want to do, especially if you've got to get out of the house and you've got to do this. And what I would say, For those morning transitions, give yourself more time. I was reading something the other day and I can't remember where, but it was like on average, there's like children need about 90 minutes to get ready in the morning. But think about how sometimes how quick it is. And I know that that might not be realistic. I'm not saying do 90 minutes, but can you give yourself, especially as we go back to school, can you give yourself 20 minutes longer? You're not going to be here forever. But if you are feeling calmer, then that's going to be easier to navigate these things. And another tip as well that I'd also say for parents is, or for anyone, it's what am I doing to look after myself, especially if it's busy, if I'm juggling a lot, if there is childcare, if there is work and it's back to school. It's very easy to put ourselves at the bottom of the list. And I know, we talk about self-care, look after yourself, da 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 da, but it's crucial that I look after myself as well. Because if I'm not looking after myself, that's going to have such a ripple effect on everybody else in the household. So, what does that look like for me?
Yeah.
Even if it means I'm getting up 10 minutes earlier to go for a walk around the block instead of lying in for 10 minutes, or whatever. I mean, whatever that might mean. Even sometimes just taking the time to just drink more water. And I know these things sound so simple, but my key is start simple. Because if there's nothing left of you to give, then there's nothing left to give. And then everybody else gets that ripple effect too.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Can
kind of
I,
forgot
can I
your
just
question.
jump in and
Sorry.
ask you something? Can I just jump in and ask you something about this? Because I think what we're fighting in terms of behavioral patterns is little girls are so often brought up to acquiesce, to be pleasant, to be polite, and to put themselves sort of second, and to share, and all. I mean, all these things are lovely in terms of sharing and everything else, but how that translates into adulthood is very often, and it's kind of hammered home. It's less so now, I suppose. There's been a bit of a shift, but you're seen as selfish if you look after yourself first. A good mother puts everyone else first. So how can we shift our own mindset and our own behavior around this, so that we see that actually no, it's the polar opposite of selfish, and it's not even self-care, which you can sometimes think, oh, that's just lying in a bubble bath and going to a spa or whatever. Actually, no, getting up 10 minutes earlier means I'm making sure that I'm ready and I'm okay in my own time frame, so I can breathe out. And then when chaos descends, which it will, I'm all good. That it's that.
Mm. Mm. It is a mindset shift. I completely agree. It is, and it's as with anything. See this as a muscle that you're building. Um, and I would say start small. But it really comes back to that compassion piece, that internal chatter that you're having of I'm a bad mum or I'm a bad dad or parent because I'm I'm going to the gym, let's say, instead of doing something at home with my kids. To actually, this is going to make me a better parent, it's going to make me a better partner. And that's a story we have to start reframing. Now, and I'd also say, if you're into journaling, journal a bit about this in terms of, okay, if I go to the gym, using that as an example, if I go to the gym, how's that going to make me feel? What impact is that going to have with the people around me? What impact is it going to have with me internally? And even reflect on times. I was speaking to a dad recently where he said he didn't realize how important his walk was around the lake with another friend of his pushing the pushchair 3 times a week, because he didn't get to do it for a week or something had happened. He's like, I didn't realize how important just that 30-minute section was, because when I came home, it helps me be more patient. It helps me to be more tolerant. I don't get wound up about the same things. But it does start perhaps with recognizing as well. What I'd say is this will feel uncomfortable. So notice that resistance that steps in and that guilt that steps in. And even sit with your guilt, make up a guilt character, right? Greedy guilt. Here we are again. Hello, old friend, right? Welcome, right? It's fine. You're here to protect me. But I know that by me giving myself these 10 minutes or 20 minutes, that's going to make me a better parent. And that's going to make me feel better inside. And I'm doing this for them. And see this almost as reverse. If I'm not taking from them, I'm giving more to them. So what, I'm a big fan of the visuals and stuff like that. But if there's like, I'm actually, in terms of like, I'm actually giving more by going, I'm not taking something from them. Um, but it is, again, go easy on yourself. What is a small thing that you can start with and expect that resistance to be there? It's not going to feel comfortable. But the reality is, if I don't, then what,
One of the things I love about how you do use a lot of visual and character terms in terms of identifying how you're feeling and, putting a name on it, but also an image to it, is that, people might think that's quite a childish thing to do because we're dealing with children. But actually, it's really not. And it's something that as adults we can use. It, in fact, it doesn't even matter if you don't have children and your mornings are stressful because of your own different reasons. I've worked with coaches throughout my career, and obviously my career was very different as working in television. But the stresses that I encountered sometimes, they were quite similar really to the mornings of getting out the door, with a bunch of toddlers. It's the same. So it's a transfer. What you're talking about here is a transferable method of identifying how we're feeling and utilizing it in a way to calm us down. And what I would urge anyone watching to do, if it is guilt, if it is anger, if it is you feel like I'm not, what's the word? I'm not as good a parent as I feel like I so-called should be or could be. Do that. And what I would also add in there is sometimes it really helps if you're an audio person as well. Give it a silly voice. And because the minute you do that,
Yes.
you take the sting out of it and you take this horrible feeling of whether it's self-loathing or, like I say, anger or irritation or whatever. And it's almost like you put it all into this one thing, and then you see how ridiculous it is, and then you can make it go.
Mm.
Whereas you're holding it all inside. And again, this might sound really childish, but trust me, it works. I'm in my 50s, and it really works.
It absolutely does. And, if we're going into that negative chatter as well, that's something else I want to share, because one of the things I do with children and parents is we create that unwelcome visitor. And the best name I ever had a child say to me, he called his butt brain. And I was like, that is brilliant. Like, butt brain is like the best name ever, and identifying when your version of butt brain appears. Is it when I'm taking time out for myself? Is it when I'm giving that presentation at work? I mean, mine's called Arnold. He's not that creative as butt brain, but it is. I was like, don't know where Arnold comes from, but anyway, that's the name that came in. But beginning to get really familiar with, okay, in these situations, I might notice it. I might notice more of that negative chatter, because obviously with those feelings comes we've got the thoughts and the feelings, and it's all intersectional, interconnected. And what I'd also then say is start to challenge those thoughts. So start to challenge, I'm not a good parent. I'm selfish for taking time for myself. Okay, let's challenge that. Is this thought really 100% true, that you're a selfish or that you're a bad parent because your child's just told you they hate you and they've had a full meltdown, right? Is that really 100% true? Of course it's not true. How does this thought make me feel? Pretty shit. Does it make me feel good? Who would I be? And I love this question. Who would I be if I didn't have this thought? And I always find the minute I ask myself that question, I'm like, oh, well, I literally feel the release and like the relief in my body. And then I also, with children, we become a thought detective. And this is just as powerful for adults. Find evidence or 3 clues to prove that this thought is not true. So when hasn't this been true? And of course, then we can go into, what would you tell your best friend, or what would you say to somebody you care about? But I find that and there's many other questions we can ask, but I find that by actively, okay, what is it I'm thinking? Because this is the other thing, Andrea, we weren't taught to question our thoughts, right? And this is like, we would just believe the thought I have, and this is the story I have, and I'm not good at this because of X, Y, and Z, but I've never stopped to question it. And actually, okay, oh, hold on, this isn't true. And actually, what's a different story I could tell myself instead? one that might make me just feel a little bit better. It's not about amazingly better, right? It's like, okay, what can make me feel that little bit more empowered versus disempowered? And again, I'd say it's such a powerful exercise. I do this with adults, with teenagers, with, with young kids as young as 5. We can start to unpick some of these thoughts. But it's so important because this is part of the work that we're doing as adults while we're trying to help our children learn these skills as well. Because but we also have to understand you've got years of conditioning of thinking a thought in a certain way. So it will take a bit of unpicking, but become aware, what are those stories that you're telling yourself that actually don't make you feel very good? Let's start to question that.
And I
Yeah.
think, and that is all such brilliant advice. And I think the one thing that I would chip in with it is also that if you are feeling, I've done a really bad job today, and because some days you go to bed, you go, do you know what? I was not what is now called my best self. I was angry, I was irritable, I was grumpy, I snapped at everybody and all of those things. And do you know what? There is no way to reframe it. I did it. So I think it's really important as well to look yourself in the eye and go, yep, that wasn't good. Fess
Mm,
up to everyone.
mm,
Hands up. I'm really sorry.
yeah.
I was not my best today or yesterday or whatever, if you've needed a bit of space. But I think own it as well, and then go, but I see that, and today is a new day and we're starting. And I think that I really feel that there's, when we behave in a way that we know isn't great, I think just telling ourselves that, actually, no, I'm all okay. There's a little voice that whispers, no, you're not. What about how you were
Mm,
yesterday? So I
mm,
think if you sort of own up to it and go, do you know what?
mm.
I was an absolute cow. I'm really sorry. That little voice goes, oh, she's owned it, and calms down. And everyone
Yeah.
else goes, oh, okay, two things. Oh, good. She's admitted it. So I'm not sitting here in resentment that, mum thinks or wife
Mm,
thinks or
mm,
whatever thinks that she's got
mm.
away with that. But also it allows me to have a bad day because I know that actually it's all right, because mum or partner or whatever will go, it's okay. I do it too. And it's such a release. And again, we haven't been programmed to do this, to either fess up afterwards. Everyone just kind of sulks and goes into their different spaces. Um, it's actually
No,
a
it is
release. It's good to let it out and go, yeah, I was a bitch. I'm sorry.
but it is, and I think that's the other thing that I often say as well to parents, like, apologize, like, often, like, I'm going to mess up my child because I've done this or I've said this, oh my goodness, why did I say that? But own it, like you say, and there's always an opportunity for a do-over. You can't actually get this wrong. Even if something happened last year, now you realize, I never should have said that. Own it now and say, do you know what? When that happened last year, I'm really sorry. I got so overwhelmed with my feelings that I didn't even think what was going on for you. I'm sorry. And when we can own it, like you say, you're also modeling to them what you want them to do if you've got children. How do you own it when things go wrong? What do you do when you've gotten it wrong? But I'd also then say what you've said there, owning it, let's then, okay, move forward with compassion. Let's not get into that spiral of, oh, but then I'm the word, because that can be easy sometimes to do, as well as like, okay, this has happened. I'm sorry, hands up. Okay, but I'm learning as well. And for parents, I'm a good parent. I'm a good parent and I'm learning too. I think that's a key thing. So I love that you shared that, because it wasn't, nobody, I mean, my parents loved me and they did brilliant, but they rarely apologized when they should have apologized, and teachers. And I think
Yeah.
that it's so important to do.
How important is a sense of humor in all of this?
Yeah. I mean, this is something I'm still working on too, right? Because I can be very serious and I think of things very seriously. A sense of humor, I think, is really important. And I'm not saying make everything a laugh or a smile. There are some serious moments, but I mean, I personally am learning this in life too, because I'm like, what's going to be this? It's going to be serious. And actually, I'm like, but what? Like, let's just chill. Let's just laugh a little bit. And I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. There's this quote. I can't remember who said it, but children on average laugh about 300 times a day. And we laugh, I don't know, on average how much. And I was like, oh, we've got to be more kid. We've got to play more. And I think that's why play is important. And I think
Yeah.
if you do have young children and even teens, use that sometimes as an opportunity to play with them. And actually, on the language of play, play is such a great way to connect with children if you do have children, in terms of it's how they communicate, it's how they understand the world. And even teens on, laptops and games, and you don't get their game at all, I really would encourage you to get them to teach you some of the games
Mm.
and get into their world. But equally, if you don't have children, what can you do to play to make things lighter? I think, we can be very serious about things. But nothing is really, very little things are really as serious as what they need to be, and I'm saying this out loud for myself as well. So,
No, I get it because it is important and it matters a lot. So we feel seriously about it, but um, we can approach serious things with a lightness of touch, and that doesn't take away at all from how important it is. And also find your own little groove with it. When kids are younger, it's a lot easier to instigate sort of play. We and obviously our kids are sort of here, there, and everywhere right now because they're older. But I know when at one point we had four teens in the house, and I'll let that sink in for a moment. Four. It was, it could be quite something, could be quite intense. Um, but now they're all kind of
cool.
coming and going.
Learn.
But one of the things that we did was, and for me, it stemmed for me when I was first divorced and a single parent, and I thought I need to find a way to make meal times a moment where we come together and we just breathe out and our shoulders come down. And I carried it on, and we've only recently sort of stopped it because the kids are older. But it was every meal time, as in every dinner time, because obviously you're not together every meal time. I bought some of the worst dad joke books in the world, or like a pack of cards that had jokes in. And some of the teenagers would literally be like, "Oh my God, she's doing that thing again." And I was like, "I don't care. We're going to find the worst joke." And what it did was it just broke the ice. And even the ones
Mm,
rocking back in their chair and on their phone and scrolling, no matter how many times you said, put the phone down at the table and all that, they're not listening to you, they'd kind of not be able to help themselves, end up joining in. Then we moved on from the dad joke books and we found these silly games, and we allowed the kids to have the phone at the table. It was where it was like charades, but you had to put it up on your head and you didn't know what the word was. Hours. I mean, hours would go by sitting at the dinner table. And what they didn't realize was it was deliberate. It wasn't just Andrea being silly.
mm,
It was, let's forget about our day. Let's forget about our differences. Let's have a moment where actually we're just being ourselves and being really silly. And also, there's this little kernel that we're planting, like a little seed that we're planting, that actually it's all good. And so even when, we're all doing our separate things and all that sort of stuff, we still have moments where we'll go, oh, let's get the game out, and we'll play the thing. And actually, learning moments don't have to always be face on. Again, I
see.
learned this as a single
Mm,
parent. That the strongest learning moments are sideways. They're never, let me sit
yes.
down and tell you about the way of the world
Yeah.
and how things are going to be. Actually, it's walking side by side, or it is driving in the car.
Yeah.
I do a lot of driving and pickups deliberately so I can have sideways conversations. That's how you find out what's going on in their world. That's how okay, that sounds like you say, acknowledge that sounds really tough. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? What do you think you're going to do tomorrow about that?
Mm,
Rather than them feeling like they're interrogated. And I think all of these life tips, we may not have been taught them. I mean, I was lucky. I was taught some of them by my parents, but it's never too late to start. It's never too late to buy a rubbish
yeah.
dad joke book. It's never too late to find a silly game to play. You can always start. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the, bringing in that humor and that lightness, one of the things that I often, when we're, sort of when I work with parents, is about big feelings and how do we regulate these big
Mm,
feelings. And one of the things that we also look at is move it to lose it, where I move my body in a safe way to get rid of that feeling. So instead of punching my brother in the face, let me shake it out. But many families have actually created their power playlist where they choose a few songs, and if they can feel there's a bit of scratchiness or a bit of edginess or maybe some anxious feelings, right, Alexa, Alexa, Google, whatever, play the song, and off they go and they do a silly dance off. And another family I worked with, they really struggled to get their daughter to brush teeth, like going through that emotion. So they would create like silly dance moves in order to, like today we're going to add one move, tomorrow we're going to add another one to that. But that just brought the playfulness into it. And I
mm,
think that, appreciate, we can't really do this all the time, but just little
correct.
silly things like you
Mm,
say that brings in that humor. And touching on another thing, when you spoke about the side by side conversations, that's so powerful. And always trying to lead with that curiosity first versus, right, let's have the talk and this is what you should do and da 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 da. Because I think when we can lead with that curiosity, no matter how tough that conversation might be, we're finding out where they are first. And when we can find out where they are, then it's easier to kind of meet them there versus I've got to fix this problem, or I've got to, tell them what to do here. And sometimes, and this will feel so uncomfortable for you, parents, for
mm,
you, because you can see 10 steps ahead, you can see the
yeah.
crash that's going to take place. But the main thing, especially for the older children, get like that non-judgmental space, that space of curiosity, but you're safe and I'm here and I'm your safe space and I'm always here. That's so important to hold. And so I always say, like, try and hold back from telling and be more curious and wonder first to see where they're at first. And that works really well in those side by side
Mm,
places, because as well, like head on, we're like eye contact, and that signals threat to our
yeah.
system. um so yeah, I think I'm gonna get a prepared dad jokes for me and my husband, actually.
I'm very strange. I love bad jokes. I love really corny, cringy. The bigger the groan, the bigger the win. I love them, and I don't know why, but I just do. I just do. Um, Natalie, where can people reach you if they want to find you and find out more about you?
Yeah, sure. So Instagram, I'm on there very often. My handle's Power Thoughts NC. My website, powerthoughts.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm playing on LinkedIn a little bit more. So that's Natalie Costa, I think. Is that how it works? Just on there, my name. So yeah, all social media places. Don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'll put all
But
the links here for everybody as well. I'll put all the links. That's been so, so brilliant. And I know you're going to have helped so many people today. Thank you, Natalie.
thank you. Thank you so much.